Well, a U.S. federal appeals court Thursday refused to reinstate President Donald Trump's ban on travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim nations. The appeals court panel said the government had not shown a likelihood of success on the merits of its appeal, nor had it shown that failure to enter a state would cause irreparable harm to the country. Isabella Cioccioli of VOA News has more.
At a news conference in Seattle, Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General for the state of Washington, which argued against restoring the travel ban, called the appellate court ruling a victory for the U.S. Constitution.
We are a nation of laws. Those laws apply to everybody in our country, and that includes the President of the United States.
U.S. Attorney General August Flentier argued that Trump's executive order was well within the president's power granted by Congress and the Constitution. But Washington State Solicitor General Noah Purcell said reinstating the travel ban without a full judicial review would throw the country back into chaos. The case may well end up in the Supreme Court. Isabella Cioccioli, VOA News, Washington.
So, what's the political fallout for President Trump and what happens next? We're joined in Washington by our own political experts, VOA Senior National Correspondent Jim Malone and VOA Congressional Correspondent Kathryn Gypson. I welcome both of you. Thanks for joining us. Kathryn, so travel from those 7 countries is now back to the way it was before the ban was put in place.
Right.
On what grounds did this appeals court rule that, in fact, that ban was unconstitutional?
So the court asked the government lawyers for the Trump administration to prove or give evidence that people from these 7 countries had the likelihood of committing a terrorist attack when they came into this country. And there was this very interesting pause from the government lawyer where they said,
He couldn't
give it.
Answer that, right?
And basically the way he responded was to say that they didn't think that the courts had the power to review this decision, and that obviously didn't go over well with the courts. There's co-equal branches of government in this country, right, and they have the power to review this decision.
And Jim Malone, a record number of people were actually listening to this appeal. So the president is now 3-0. In terms of the legal issues. How big a setback do you think this is going to be for the Trump White House?
It's a setback for the moment. I want to go back to how you cast it, though. Remember what we're talking about. Okay. We're talking about the initial ruling from a federal judge in Washington to stay or put on hold the Trump ban. Right. It's specifically about that. The underlying bigger issue here is the president going beyond his authority? Are there unconstitutional aspects, perhaps targeting Muslims? That will be debated in the courts more fully as the case moves forward. This was specifically on the issue of, can we stop the ban for now while we sort all this out? So yes, it's a setback now, but the Trump White House is still confident. They're saying they're still confident that down the line, say when it gets to the Supreme Court, that they will hold sway. We'll see about that.
So let's talk about, Kathryn, what happens next? Does this go to the Supreme Court? Is that an automatic?
Well, the Justice Department said that they were going to review the decision, take a look at their options, take a step back. They could, of course, go to the Supreme Court, but we don't have a full Supreme Court. Right. So the likelihood of a split 4-4 decision is there, and if that happens, then it goes down to what that circuit court ruled.
So the lower court ruling then
and it
becomes
affirms it.
Right,
so that could be a risky strategy for the Trump administration. Now, there was some language in the ruling that kind of pointed towards another option for the Trump administration, and that's to rewrite the ban itself so that it doesn't have that language in there that talks about the religious exceptions for minorities, for Christians and Muslim majority nations. Mm-hmm. If possibly they could rewrite it that way so that it doesn't violate the Constitution, maybe that's an option for them as well.
There's various options right now, but Jim Malone, breaking through some of this legalese, it's essentially about determining the limits of what a president can and cannot do, isn't it?
It is, and what we're getting now is this sense of Donald Trump as president. The way he was talking about the courts this past week, the way even his Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch, expressed the fact that he thought it was demoralizing and disheartening in some of his talks with senators that the president would kind of go after members of the judiciary like this. So now we've got this issue with how Trump sees his power, how he sees the ability of the courts and perhaps Congress to check his power. This is a debate as old as our republic on separation of powers, the rule of law. And we're starting to see how Donald Trump views this. Now we want to see if he is in fact checked to an extent. He's already been a little bit by the courts, but if that holds up, how will he react to that?
Kathryn, you covered an interesting testimony by Homeland Chief John Kelly earlier this week on Capitol Hill. The president, of course, claims that the rollout of this ban went very smoothly, but Kelly's testimony seems to suggest otherwise. Right?
That's right. Kelly's testimony was a little bit of damage control on Capitol Hill. He came up there and right off the bat he said, we should have done better on this rollout. We should have informed members of Congress. We should have laid the groundwork with the media, with Congress, with the committees that would have helped give this rollout a little bit of a smoother introduction to the public. And he was also referring to it as a temporary pause. So there's a little bit of language there that tried to kind of reshape the debate to show this isn't a permanent ban.
Right.
This is just a temporary pause. And he explained again and again, this is what we want to do, is just to step back and take a look at the vetting procedures so that we can do a better job. So you could sense a little bit of damage control there on Kelly's part.
Obviously, and Kelly's testimony is sort of akin to falling on the sword for President Trump. He essentially takes some of the blame for that. But also, I'm curious about Gorsuch's comments, Neil Gorsuch's comments regarding how demeaning and demoralizing this is for justices. Does that perhaps help him in his confirmation hearings?
It could. I mean, some Democrats have spoken favorably of the fact that he would make these comments. Others, like the Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer of New York, said, well, it really is incumbent upon him to speak publicly to this now that he's, but whatever. I mean, there is something there that Gorsuch has a pretty good legal reputation. He may be seen by Democrats as too conservative, but it may be hard for them to challenge him on his legal credentials. The other thing, though, here is obviously some of these executive orders are being rushed out. And it looks like an effort to please President Trump's voter base, the people who got him in the White House. So to that extent, some of these court rulings may kind of slow that whole effort down. It's going to make, it already has made the president frustrated with the pace of change.
Very quickly, could we see some quick action on this ban from the president?
Well, we've already seen him tweeting after the court ruling saying that he'll take it to the courts.
But could that happen fairly soon?
We'll see what the Justice Department says.
All right.